special permission of the California Department of Corrections, we take you now to Folsom State Prison. You are inside Folsom Prison. The prisoner is being taken to the boardroom for a parole hearing. He's serving time for armed robbery. He was a successful businessman. He held up a restaurant. Why did this man commit this crime? In a moment, we take you into the boardroom for the actual parole hearing, exactly as it takes place. Parole, brought to you this week from Folsom State Prison in California. Folsom Prison is in California, not far from the scene of the great gold rush that a century ago opened the West. It's a maximum security institution, and behind its great stone walls are imprisoned mostly those who more than once have failed to adjust to society. But even the most consistent recidivist never gives up hope. He serves his time and waits to the long and tedious years for the one day that may bring him freedom. The day of the parole hearing. In California, the adult authority sets the definite sentence within the indeterminate period imposed by law. They also determine what part may be served on parole. This is one of the panels in session today. Irvis W. Lester, criminologist and former deputy police chief of Los Angeles. James D. Tanty, attorney and former labor union official. And C.J. Fitzharris, former associate warden of San Quentin. In the hands of these three men lies the fate of the prisoner about to appear before them. Number 67867. This is prisoner number 67867. He is 45 years old, is serving an indeterminate sentence of 5 years to life for armed robbery. He blames heavy gambling losses for the crime that sent him to prison. The day of the parole hearing has arrived. Will it bring him freedom?
Would you come on in and have a seat then? How old are you now?
I'll be 45 in July.
And how long have you been in prison this time?
18 months.
And what are you here for?
Robbery.
Armed robbery?
Well, it wasn't a real gun.
But first-degree robbery,
first-degree
because
robbery.
it was found to be a dangerous weapon.
That's right.
You held up a restaurant, didn't you?
Yes. I stuck the place out, taped up a woman and the porter.
But wasn't there more to that when you went in? Didn't you talk to the secretary in the place about her purchasing a television set?
Oh, well, I was in there a few days previous to that, and we got to talking, and she said that she did want to buy a television if she could get it cheap, and I told her, well, I might be able to get her one, and then the following Monday morning was when I went in and attempted to stick the place up.
Were you alone at the time that the robbery occurred?
No, I was with another fellow.
I see. Then you pulled this weapon out of your pocket or
Yes.
something? And what happened from that point on?
Well, I taped the woman up and taped the porter up, and
You taped her hand?
her hands to the chair, and the porter, he was on the floor. And I took what money there was and walked out.
How much money was there?
It's about $600.
And this other fellow that was with you, was he inside with you?
Yes, he was.
And under what circumstances were you apprehended? How were you caught?
Well, there was a fellow that worked across the street from this place in a filling station, and he saw my nephew, that's who was with me on this, run to the car, and then a few minutes later I came out and he gave a description of the car, and we were stopped.
Well, now coming to the point, why did you commit this robbery?
I don't know, Mr. Tainty. I, for the life of me, don't know.
Were you short of funds at the time?
Yes, I was. started gambling, and I lost quite a bit, once in Reno and once in Vegas, and, well, just foolishly, I went ahead and made an attempt to get it.
How much money did you lose gambling?
Well, it was a few $1,000s.
Over how long a period of time?
Well, it was, I'd say about 4 months, 4 or 5 months.
Apparently you did well when you conducted yourself in a legitimate manner outside. You made a couple $100 a week, didn't you?
More, if I'd work hard. If I was buying up job lots, merchandise, and selling, without being braggadocious, I could make $300, $350, $400 if I wanted to work hard.
Didn't you want to work hard?
Well, I just worked, and, well, sure, I'd work hard. And,
you live high?
Yes, I did, yes.
You had this air pistol.
Yes, sir.
How long had you had that?
Well, I bought it for my nephew's boy. At the time when I bought it, I had no intentions of ever using it. I mean, outside of just letting the kid play with it.
When was the first time you were arrested?
It's been so long ago, Mr. Kenny, I don't think I can remember that far back.
Wasn't it in 1927 it involved an auto theft?
Yes, I believe it was. There was 4 of us, and this fellow took the car from an uncle. It was a truck is what it was, and we ran away from home. And when we came back, we were all arrested.
And then after that, how many times have you been arrested? I don't mean found guilty or incarcerated.
Well, for the type of work I was doing, Mr. Kenny, I'd buy up merchandise. A lot of times I'd go into a town and I wouldn't buy a license, and I'd get stopped and sometimes taken down and booked and pay a fine for peddling without a license, and sometimes just given a pass and told to get out of town.
There were a large number of arrests.
Oh, yes, very many.
One in particular I notice here had to do with selling sweaters. Were those the sweaters that were of inferior merchandise and were quite volatile? They were burned easily?
No, at that time when I was arrested, they thought they were, but they weren't.
What kind of childhood did you have? Was it comparatively happy at home, or was it not?
Well, it's hard to say. My dad was a dominating type, and he was in the whiskey business when we were kids. That was during Prohibition. And the type of people that come into the house, I mean, grifters and racket people.
And your dad was then illegally engaging in the sale of alcoholic beverages during Prohibition, and did he make a considerable amount of money then?
Yes, he did.
Do you think that there is a connection between the way you were raised and the life you've had?
Definitely, yes.
You don't feel as though you were taught right from wrong or obedience?
Well, no. I don't know. Well, it was always that easy money and cutting corners and so forth. When I was 15 years old, I was delivering whiskey, and there was nothing to have 100 or so in my pocket and play the part of a big shot. My dad was a bootlegger. And that's the pattern I followed. I just fell into it.
You feel as though you're a product of that environment. Well, what about in the future? Don't you feel as though you're still a product of that environment?
No,
Don't you think
no.
it'll be difficult to be successful outside?
No, I don't think so, Mr. Annie. I'm sure if and when you see fit to turn me back into society, that if I live to be 110, I'd never come behind this mic or board, or I just made my mind up, that's all. It's just one of them things. I had enough. This has woke me up, believe me.
Serving this time here?
Yes, it just woke me up. And then going to group counseling, it's showed me a lot of things that I've done in the past that I've been wronged, and it's helped me quite a bit.
Mr. Fitzharris, do you have any questions?
If you get into a tight corner where you need money and it looks like it's an easy way to get it, why do you think you wouldn't do it again?
Well, there's no such thing as an easy way to get it.
Well, it was easy to walk in, take away from a woman.
That's what I thought, but I found out different. Before I got arrested, it might be hard to believe, but I was sorry. I was sorry the minute I walked out of the place. It's hard to believe, but it's the truth.
You were sorry because you knew you were going to get arrested?
Well, I was sorry I committed the robbery, because I had no reason to do it. All I had to do was work that day, and I could have made a little money. I know at the end of the day I'd have made something.
Well, then why did you do
Well,
it?
I was just in a mood. It's hard to describe. I mean, I was more or less mad at myself for losing the money that I did lose after working so hard for it. And just goes back to the same thing, path of least resistance. I thought I could get away with it, which I didn't.
That's all I have, Mr. Klein.
Mr. Lester?
What happened to your crime partner?
Excuse me, my nephew was given probation.
Did he claim that he didn't know anything about this being a robbery?
Up until the time I was going, in fact, I was going in there alone. But when we pulled up in front of the place, he had no idea that I was going to rob the place. But then I talked him into it. And that is the truth.
I have no.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No.
Okay. That'll be all.
Will the prisoner be granted parole? Here is the decision.
This man seems pretty well motivated. He's making a pretty good adjustment in here. However, he's been getting into trouble now for almost 30 years. Although he is beginning to have some understanding, I think it's too early for parole. But I think that perhaps it might be wise, in this particular case, to set this man's term at this time. What do you think, Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Certainly the time is not ripe for him to go out on parole, but might give him some encouragement to see an end to the sentence.
I think it's desirable to set a term at this time. If you'll notice, his entire criminal history is devoid of any seriously aggressive conduct. There's never been any violence, and even though this time he's in for robbery, the gun was air pistol and was not considered by the court to be a deadly weapon.
Well, do you think that setting his term at 6 years would be proper in this case?
Good.
6 or perhaps 6.5, giving us just a little more control. I have a feeling that this man, when he gets a parole, will conform to the regulations. He has shown a very good adjustment for the last 10 years. And under control, he would probably do very well.
Say 6.5-year term?
Yes.
All right, then his term will be set at this time at 6.5 years. We will see him again in 1 year to consider whether or not he shall go on parole. But as far as parole at this time is concerned, he is denied.
Parole denied. In a moment, we take you to the second hearing on parole. And now, the second hearing on parole. On the panel for this hearing are Clinton T. Duffy, former warden of San Quentin, C.J. Fitzharris, and Everett M. Porter, attorney and civic leader. The prisoner whose fate these three men will decide is number 68687. This is prisoner number 68687. He is 34 years old, is serving an indeterminate sentence of 7 years to life for robbery and escape. He blames his life as a child for the crimes that sent him to prison. The day of the parole hearing has arrived. Will it bring him freedom?
Just have a seat. Will you start off by telling us your age and where you're from?
I'm 34. I was born in Syracuse, and I'm from L.A. at the present.
How much of the 34 years of your life have you spent in correctional institutions?
Let's say about 9 years.
About 9 years of your 34.
Yes.
When was the first time that you were put in a correctional school?
38, I think it was.
How old were you?
17.
What was that for?
Stealing a purse.
stealing a purse?
Yes.
The next time you were in serious trouble is when you came into San Quentin in 1947?
Yes.
And what was that for?
I stole another purse.
You were paroled?
Yes.
You returned to prison on as a parole violator?
Yes.
Well, why didn't you make a success of your parole?
Well, I had epileptic fits, and I just couldn't hold down a job at that time.
Then you were ultimately discharged from this institution in December of 1950, is that right?
Yes.
And in just a matter of a month or so, you were in more trouble, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Which were at this time then were robberies, huh?
Yes.
You were then convicted of robbery first degree, and you were transferred to California Institution for Men at Chino. You were down there just a relatively short time. How long?
8 months.
8 months, and you escaped.
Yes. I don't know what it was. I just wanted freedom or something. I just got lonely for the home and just went out, saw my wife, or common law, and I took off from there.
Did you get to see your common law wife?
Yes, I did.
And then what?
Well, she wanted me to return.
Why didn't you?
I guess I can't give an answer to that. I just don't know.
How long was it before you were apprehended?
About 3 months.
You'd look upon that 3 months that you were
No
at
please.
large as a happy time in your life?
No, that was the worst time I ever had.
No, it's a pretty sad life, looking back over your shoulder, expecting to be arrested every time you turn
It's too
around.
much.
And then you were convicted of the escape, and now you've been back 2 years on this charge, huh?
Yes.
Now, the record indicates that you had quite a disturbing childhood. You had been in an orphanage. That was because of the death of your mother.
Yes, it's true.
You stayed there how long?
About 9 years.
About 9 years, and then how did you happen to be released from the orphanage?
Well, I just got homesick and I ran away from there.
And did you ever live with your father after that?
Yes, we did.
Record indicates that it was he had a hard time doing it.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
things were rough in those days. And there was no stepmother in the picture.
No, there wasn't.
So you had to run the streets then.
Well, that's all I was left to do. We had
And you got in with other youngsters and eventually started stealing small things.
it was just stealing milk bottles and then going for into milk bottles and to stealing a purse and that one. Then I got arrested after that.
That's why I say it starts out with little things,
Well,
milk
yeah.
bottles, and then
Yeah,
you get
I
much
see what
smaller
you
milk
mean.
bottle. Gradually gets into more serious things, just purses, then a robbery, then escape, and then more trouble, see? You were also, you went into the Army. And you saw some action, didn't you? It's pretty rugged action. Where were you in action?
Guadalcanal.
In Guadalcanal? And you were wounded?
Yes.
And what, how seriously were you wounded?
Not too bad, just chest and face.
You got shrapnel wounds in your chest and face?
Yes.
And then you lose the hearing in your ear for a while?
Oh, that was, yeah.
There's been a continued attacks of epilepsy since
Oh,
that,
that's,
which are attributable to that.
Well, that's just
Shock.
nervous condition. I think it's from the, I don't know.
This epilepsy, however, was one of the things that you said at one time was contributed towards your lack of adjustment on the outside. In other words, you'd have an attack on the job and then they would fire you.
Yes.
I want to compliment you on your work record.
Well, I've gone into cooking, and I've been 2 years in the kitchen, and I've also taken up baking.
You expect to go into that when you go out, huh?
I know I can make now in that baking. That's about the only thing I did like since I've been here has been baking.
You think you'd make good as a baker?
Oh, yeah, I hope so.
Mr. Porter, do you have anything that you'd like to say?
Yes, you were first married in 1940, were you?
No, 43, Mr. Porter.
1943? Were there any children born to the first marriage?
No, that was no.
This second woman you married,
I haven't married in the second
well,
one.
you were living with her.
Yes.
And were you living with her at the time you went to the Army?
No, I met her in Honolulu during the war.
How many children has she now?
She has 2.
2 children, and both are yours?
No, both are her own.
When you're released here, you do plan on marrying her, is that correct?
Matter of fact, we have quite a few dollars put in the bank just for that one reason.
For that purpose?
Yes, we're buying a home up here in Walnut Creek. It's already being established.
That's good.
Mr. Duffy?
We have a notice from a city in upper New York State that you're wanted by them.
That's true.
It's what we call a hold.
Yes.
And the information I get from the central file is that's for armed robbery.
I was in the city at the time of the escape, and I'm sure as soon as I go back there that they will find out they have the wrong party.
From your escape from the California Institution
Yes.
for Men at Chino,
Yes.
you and your partner in the escape went to New York State, didn't you?
New York
Both
State,
of you.
Yes. We was going to, I don't know what big ideas we had, but we was going to go into Mexico, and I was supposed to go to France and then work over there and all that. Then it just didn't turn out that way. After I escaped, I just couldn't see no other way to do but just go around in circles.
Well, let me just leave this thought with you now. We do not know what New York State's going to do about that hold.
Oh, I understand.
No doubt they will come for you and take you back there. You have to serve some more time, build to the future, wherever you might be. I have nothing else.
Is there anything you'd like to add now?
No.
Well, I guess that'll be all then. We'll let you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Will the prisoner be granted parole? In a moment, the decision. And now, the decision.
Well, gentlemen, I was more impressed with this man's appearance than I was with his record. Looking at his early life and his background, I think it's kind of understandable why he should be a mixed-up young man. And then when you look at his military record and his wounds and so forth, I think maybe we could understand a little better the silly actions he's shown us. Looks, however, like he's beginning to get some insight into his behavior, and it looks like, although he's had a bad start with this young lady, that she might be a stabilizing influence. The situation is kind of complicated by the fact that he has a 5-year minimum term on the first one, and the second, the escape, is a 2-year term, CS, with the consecutive with the first one, so that makes a minimum of 7 years. And I'd suggest that we give him the minimum term of 5 years on the first count and 2 years on the second, and give him 2 years on parole to go to the hold.
Well, I feel that he's made a fairly good institutional adjustment since being here, especially in view of the his physical handicaps. And then, too, there is a good likelihood that he might have to do some additional time when he gets out of here. So taking everything into consideration, I believe your recommendation is the proper thing to do.
Mr. Duffy, do you?
Yes, I feel the same way about it. I think that he may have to do quite a bit of time in New York State. However, if he does not, I feel that our board should review his case thoroughly again, and at that time make another determination as to whether or not he should be released here, should New York decide to release their hold.
Yes, one of the parole officers can make him aware that this means that we will reconsider the case after, if New York does not come for him.
And that would be in 6 months from now.
So the order will be then 5 years on the first sentence, 2 years on the second one, counts to run consecutively, last 2 years on parole to go to hold in New York.
Parole granted. The prisoners have appeared voluntarily in the hope that others may benefit from their experience. Next week, we take you to another penal institution on parole. by special permission of the California Department of Corrections. We take you now to San Quentin Prison. You are inside San Quentin. The prisoner is being taken to the boardroom for a parole hearing. He's a good-looking young fellow, well-educated, the son of wealthy parents. He's serving time for armed robbery. Why did this boy turn to violence and crime? In a moment, we take you into the boardroom for the actual parole hearing, exactly as it takes place. Parole, brought to you this week from San Quentin Prison in California. San Quentin is in California, not far from the Golden Gate, across the bay from San Francisco. Behind its walls are over 5,000 men, from petty thieves to murderers. And here a prisoner may work, go to school, or play ball. But it's still a prison with stone walls and steel bars, where a man serves time. And through the months and the years, every prisoner waits only for the day that may bring him freedom. The day of the parole hearing. In California, the adult authority sets the definite sentence within the indeterminate period imposed by law. They also determine what part may be served on parole. This is one of the panels in session today. Clinton T. Duffy, former warden of San Quentin. James D. Tanty, attorney and former labor union official, and Fred Finsley, attorney and former chief parole officer of California. In the hands of these three men lies the fate of the young man about to appear before them. Prisoner number 53465. This is prisoner number 53465. He is 23 years old. Is serving an indeterminate sentence of 5 years to life for armed robbery. He blames his socially prominent wealthy parents for the crime that sent him to prison. The day of the parole hearing has arrived. Will it bring him freedom?
What was the crime that brought you to
Armed
San
robbery,
Quentin?
sir.
Armed robbery. How many armed robberies did you commit?
There were 4.
You had a crime partner also in
Yes,
these
sir, I did.
escapades. You had a gun, a pistol in your possession?
Pistol and a blackjack, sir.
Pistol and a blackjack.
Yes, sir.
You went in and held these people up on all 4 occasions with the use of the pistol.
That's right, sir.
Well, how did you proceed, and will you tell us, for example, about the particular crime that brought you here and the crime for which you entered a plea of guilty?
Oh, it was almost Christmas time, and I was pretty well out of money. So I decided that the easiest way to get money was to take it from somebody. So I enlisted the aid of my crime partner, and we went, excuse me, we went to a gas station out on Sepulveda Boulevard. We parked in back of the station. I got out of the car and went to the back of the station. The tenant was in the front. I walked around the front and told him that the toilet door was locked. Well, he got the key and came around and to the back to open the door. Naturally, when he put his hand on the door, he saw it wasn't locked, and I pulled the gun on him and forced him into the bathroom, where I left him until I completed my robbery and left.
What did you say to him when you put him in there? That he should remain there for a certain period of time?
Yes, sir. I told him to remain in there for at least 30 minutes.
And then you went and got the money from the till?
Yes, sir. It was outside strong box. And I took the money from the till, took the till and all, in fact. and left.
How much money did you get from him?
$68, I believe, sir.
Did you harm him in any way?
Yes, sir. At first, when I started to leave, he made a movement which I thought was towards me, and I blackjacked him rather than shoot him. I figured that it was unnecessary to shoot him, and I'd rather hurt him than to kill him.
In looking back, do you think that the movement he made at that time was some sort of resistance?
It's hard to tell, sir, for the simple reason that when you're in a position like that, you're very teed up, and any movement from any direction or movement is liable to startle you quite well.
Well, the reason he stayed in there for 2.5 hours was not just in obeying your instructions.
No, sir, he was not unconscious. In other words, he was not unconscious. I struck him down, and he stayed down. And when I struck him down, he told me that, don't hit me again, I'll stay where I'm at.
Now, in the other cases, would you tell us something about how the reason for your striking them with a blackjack?
Well, in one instance, sir, again, I used the toilet door as an excuse to get the attendant out from the front of the station. Told him to go in. He went in. I told him what I was going to do. And he told me, well, go ahead and take it. Here's the keys. I won't bother you. I turned to leave. And when I turned to leave, he jumped on my back. There was a bit of a tussle, and he was blackjacked.
And the third one, how did that happen?
The third one was a 19-year-old boy that thought more of his life, I guess, than he did of the some $50-some that were there.
Oh, that was the one that you didn't blackjack, you mean?
No, sir, I blackjacked.
Well, do you feel as though the action on your part was absolutely necessary?
Well, at the time that I did these robberies, I thought that violence was the end of all roads, means to all ends.
You thought at the time then that you would use the blackjack, but if necessary, you might have to resort to killing.
That's right, sir.
You spent your early life in Chicago, you said?
Yes, sir.
You lived in the home with your parents?
I lived with my father, sir.
Oh, I see.
My father and mother divorced, have been since I've been 8 years old.
Oh, prior to the time you were 8 years old, you lived then with your father and mother?
Well, no, sir. I've always been put in boarding school. Actually, my residence has been in Chicago, and I've lived gone to private schools around that district.
Well, how old were you when you were first put into a school?
6, sir.
Tell us about your parents. That is, as much as you know. You spent a great deal of your time with your father. What about your father? Was he successful?
Businessly, yes, sir.
You say that he was successful in business. Now, there must be some implication to that, is there?
Well, in my personal opinion, the man, he is not a success as a man. Because, for the simple reason that he has been married 3 times, and none of his boys choose to live with him, and I think that in itself would show that a man is, well, I won't say deficient in any way, but he must not be a whole man, or his children will certainly love him.
Do you think that you would like to resume your residence with him in the future?
Definitely not.
Do you remember much about your mother?
No, sir. Very, very little.
Do you feel as though your father is to blame for depriving you of the love of a mother over these years?
Well, I can't say that, sir, because being in boarding schools and constantly surrounded by other people, I don't believe I actually miss my mother. And when my mother came to me when I first was incarcerated, I didn't feel anything until that night, then I realized how much I'd missed her.
In your early years, did you have any psychiatric treatment, or...?
Quite a bit, sir.
Well, what brought that about?
Well, my unruly ways. My father saw fit to send me to a number of psychiatrists, including one of the most eminent psychiatrists in Chicago.
Did you know what conclusions they came to about why you were unruly?
No, sir. They didn't see fit to tell me.
Do you have any doubts about your masculinity as far as the opposite sex is concerned?
No more than the average man in here does, I think, sir. I think everybody runs across it in here when he's incarcerated for any length of time, it's possible that a person might doubt it.
Well, did you have that feeling prior to the time that you came to the institution?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you have any homosexual tendencies?
Maybe it's possible I do and may not know.
Well, was your feeling toward this other inmate, was it one of, that you would say, love or something of that sort?
That is hard for me to explain, sir. I don't know.
Did you have a feeling toward him like perhaps you may have had toward a young lady on the outside at one time?
No, sir, it wasn't that kind of a feeling. It just, I don't know how you would say it.
Do you think that if you and he had been alone together and knew that you would not be disturbed, that you would have engaged in some sort of homosexual activity, or did you feel as though you had the desire to do that?
The desire was there, yes, sir, but whether the actual act would have come down, I'll never know. That's something, I'm sorry that the opportunity didn't arise so that I would know.
Quite frankly, I want to ask you, why do you get into all this trouble? Why is it that you don't work and hold down a job? Why is it that you're not trying to learn a trade and going to school? You have the ability and the intelligence, and I just wonder why it is. It seems to me, I might say, that you rather enjoy getting into some sort of trouble, hoping that you might get some sympathy from someplace one way or the other. Now, is there anything to that?
It's possible, sir.
Have you attended any classes in group psychotherapy?
Yes, sir, I was in Dr. Paulson's class.
Why did you quit?
Well, I left the hospital.
Mr. Finsley, do you have any additional questions?
Well, I would certainly strongly suggest that you do try and get back into the group therapy session and raise a lot of embarrassing questions, embarrassing to yourself, that is. You should get those out in the class, analyze them, and see if you can't get some of those conflicts resolved. I have nothing further.
Mr. Duffy?
You impress me as still being a very confused young man.
Well,
You've had a lot of good
sir.
advice here today by both Mr. Tandy and Mr. Finsley. No need to repeat it.
Is there anything else you want to say to us today?
I don't think so, sir.
Well, get in and plug. We'll consider your case and we'll let you know.
All right, sir.
Will the prisoner be granted parole? Here is the decision.
Unfortunately, this man is making very little, if any, progress at all in here. Seems to me that the time has not come when we can make any determination as far as setting his term is concerned, and of course, we can't at this time consider him going outside of the prison walls on parole. I would suggest that he be denied at this hearing and that we see him again in one calendar year and consider the same thing next year that we have this year as far as term fixing and parole is concerned.
We have no alternative.
It would be no favor to him or to society to turn him out now. I agree with your decision.
That will be the order then.
Parole denied. In a moment, we take you to the second hearing on parole. And now, the second hearing on parole. On the panel for this hearing are James D. Cantlin, Fred Finsley, and Irvis W. Lester, criminologist and former deputy police chief of Los Angeles. The prisoner whose fate these three men will decide is number 64241. This is prisoner number 64241 at his job inside the prison. He is 32 years old, is serving an indeterminate sentence of 6 months to 14 years for forgery. He blames an unhappy marriage for the crime that sent him to prison. The day of the parole hearing has arrived. Will it bring him freedom?
Men have been seated.
Yes, sir.
Well, you've been here now a year and a half, is that correct?
That's right.
On a charge of forgery.
Yes, sir.
A series of checks that were passed that in the instant crime that brought you here, those were traveler's checks, were they?
Yes, sir.
Where did you get them?
Well, I got them from another fellow I'd known for about a year. And he had a proposition to me that he had some checks there, and he'd show me how to handle them and do everything, and I could make about $500 on them.
Were these checks stolen?
Yes, sir.
Did you steal them?
No, sir.
Did you know they were stolen?
Well, imagine it would. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you there. I guess I knew they weren't his, in other words.
How many checks were there? How many did you pass?
Well, they had 1,400. They were all 50s. I passed 9 of them.
You mean $1,400 worth?
Yes, sir. $1,400 worth. That's right.
How many did you actually pass?
I passed 9 of them. At the time, my wife and I wasn't getting along too good. She had lived with another gal, and this gal was having affairs, various affairs with servicemen, and the kids, when I seen the 2 kids, they didn't have no shoes and nothing like that. And everything was going fine until the wife got a job as a waitress. She started going out with bus drivers and everything else. I just went to my mind, that's all at the time.
Hadn't you quit your job just before you had passed these checks?
Yes, sir. You see, I'd got them 3 days before, and I practiced the signature with the help of my accomplice. And the 3rd day, I asked my wife, what should I do? I think I actually wanted her to tell me no, show that I was wanting. But when she says, go ahead and I don't care what you do, that was it.
I notice you've been in orphanages most of your life. Tell me a little about your background, will you?
Well, I remember far back I was in St. Mary's Orphan Asylum originally.
How old were you then?
I don't recollect that, but my father took me out when I was about... My mother had a nervous breakdown. I remember that good. They had a big hailstorm. And they picked my mother up and they put her in a state mental hospital. My father, in the meantime, had moved in with another woman. The Catholic welfare picked all his children up. We had about, I got 4 sisters and 3 brothers. They put us all in an orphanage.
And what happened to you after you came out of the orphanage?
Well, the last year there, when I graduated from grammar school, a coach from the Holy Cross High School, and I got me a scholarship to Holy Cross High School. It's a boarding high school. I was there about 6 months, and I met a little girl that lived next door. She's come over in the yard to play tennis. I don't know, her and I got pretty close, and I wanted to take her to the show one time, and I didn't have no money. So a fellow who I'd borrowed his tennis racket lived next to me in a dormitory there. I just figured I'd borrow that, you know. So anyhow, I did. I sold it for $1.50, and I took it to the show.
That's when you went?
That was the first thing I ever did wrong, yes, sir. Right, that was the very first thing I ever did.
How old were you then?
I was going on 17. So I got kicked out, expelled from this here, from the school on account of that. And then I met a couple other guys, and I joined up in the Marine Corps. I lied about my age and everything else. And I was in there about 9 months, and I went over the hill 3 times. I finally got a BCD out of it.
By that you mean a bad conduct?
Yes, a bad conduct discharge, because I went over the hill 3 times. And I tried to go back to my sister, but she says no. But she says she don't want nobody that had a record around her house. Tried to go back to my brother. He wouldn't take me either. My wife, she fell down. She didn't have nobody, no relatives or nothing. So I was in a circle going back and forth, you know, and I lit up with a fella that ran a bookie, and he got me a job there, $5 a day, and showed me how to mark the racehorse boards, you know. And eventually I called into the horses there, and I was betting my salary, too. So her and I was pretty close in the front room that night. And she sort of felt down, you know, she was crying and everything else. And she had known I'd been fooling around. I'd bet the horses. She told me she thought she was pregnant. She went to the doctor. And she'd like to have the baby, so I thought that'd be all right.
How many children do you have altogether?
I have 2 now.
2.
Boy and a girl.
It was while you were in jail that she began to...
Yes, sir.
Kind of...
Yes, sir.
Lose a little interest or something?
Right, sir.
Was that...
Right, sir.
And what's your relationship now?
Right now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I haven't heard from her in 18 months.
Are the children with her?
That's something I don't know. The last time I heard, they were. I know she loves the children, so evidently she'll probably take them, keep.
Well, since you've been here in this last year and a half, what have you been doing to kind of pick up these pieces and put them together again and get some of the kinks straightened out?
Well, I was very mixed up. When I first come here, I couldn't think. I didn't have no mother and father directly where they could sort of school you and tell you this is right and that's right, you know. The only thing I got was from this orphan. It was always somebody, an adult, you know, but nothing too close. Well, anyhow, they told me about group therapy here. You talk among other fellas got troubles just like you, feel down, depressive, emotional, unstable, various traits there. And so I enlisted in it. By God, I come out, it took me for about 6 months, but after that I learned that people really do like you if you give them a half a chance. And through the instructor, the psychologist who was heading the class there, would help you out with different problems, make you feel at home. And they try and tell you what's wrong, and you talk to the other inmates that's in your class there, and you trade talks, chats, troubles that all of us had, you know.
Feel like you've got a lot of benefit out of it.
Oh, definitely, sure. Say, believe me, that's it.
We all need a certain
That's
amount
right.
of satisfactions, but there's
But I've
different, better
learned
ways
this,
to
though.
get them.
Right. I've learned this, too. Since I've been here, I've matured a lot, and I see different things that you can't always get what you want, you see. That's right.
Exactly.
And that if your feelings get hurt, there must be a reason for that, too, you see.
That's life.
That's it.
It's never
Right.
complete happiness for any of us. We all have our ups and downs, and we have to learn to accept that. That's what we call stability.
That's right.
Well, we're glad to see that you are making some progress and that you do feel you're growing up and getting some of these kinks straightened out. Mr. Lester, do you have any further questions?
You had a rather serious interest in professional baseball at one time, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I worked out with 2 clubs there. But I was unstable at the time, just like before I come here, and that's why I didn't make it.
Do you have any interest in it at the present time?
Well, I'm a little bit above that age. I'm 32 now, you know, and I couldn't get nowhere.
I don't have any.
Mr. Tandy, do you have any further questions?
When the time does come for your release, you anticipate, of course, that you're going to have emotional problems when you get on the outside, don't you?
Well, if I do get parole, using that for an example, and problems do come up, I'll go ahead and get advice from my parole officer.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us that we haven't covered today? Where do you plan to go, for instance, when
Right
you leave
now?
here? Well, when you do
Well, I'd like
leave.
to go out on my own. I really would. I mean, either work in a hospital in Los Angeles or San Francisco somewhere.
You intend to follow this work you're doing here, the hospital?
Well, I wouldn't say for sure, but because I could do various other jobs, but I like it. I
But
mean,
you
to be
do like
frank with
that.
you. Yes, I like helping people. I always have.
Well, that's good. You need some of that, because you haven't thought of the other fella too much.
Well,
In
let's
the
put it this
past.
way. Maybe I thought maybe he didn't think much of me either, you know?
Well, but there's a lot of good people in
I
this
understand
world,
it
and
now. Yes, sir, there
Whether,
is.
whether you find them is kind of depends on how you act, too, you see.
That's right. I learned that. That's right.
Well, okay, we'll talk it over. We'll consider your case, and we'll let you know.
Okay. Thanks a lot, huh?
You bet.
Thank you.
Will the prisoner be granted parole? In a moment, the decision. And now, the decision.
Well, I feel that the boy has made a great deal of progress since he's been here. He has no hostility at all. He's accepted the program. He's come a long way from the chap he was when he came in. I believe that we could well give this boy about a 4-year sentence and give him about 2 years and 3 months of that on parole, which would keep him about another 3 months to round out his institutional program. How do you feel, Mr. Lester?
I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think he will yield himself very well to a parole program. He identifies very well with those in authority at this time.
He'll welcome supervision. Mr. Tandy?
Yes, I think that's right.
Well, fine. We'll give him a 4-year term, 2 years and 3 months on parole.
Parole granted. The prisoners have appeared voluntarily in the hope that others may benefit from their experience. Next week, we take you to another penal institution on parole.